Welcome to the Book Binge. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today it is a topic of more or less direct honor for me to be able to say that over 3 years of my life, I spent reading The Wheel of Time. Those are the last 3 years for all intents and purposes. This video is coming out, in like mid-June. I spent May 2023 through May 2026, I guess through April, probably more appropriately, actually reading the series, and then I have been making videos about The Wheel of Time for all of those 3 years. That includes like 100 videos basically between reviews and then spoiler related diary type videos. That was an absolute journey of an experience. I certainly don't need to recap all of it here because I've made plenty of videos on that topic. I'll probably just link up there to the playlist that is directly associated to the reviews of the series, and then probably right after that I'll link to the diary playlist as well, which are the spoiler talk related stuff. But now that I have spent, a couple of months off from this sprawling kind of fantasy, right? Like I finished A Memory of Light in early April of 2026 and spent the rest of April not reading that kind of thing, and I've also spent all of May and am currently spending June not reading epic fantasy at the moment. I guess technically I have an epic fantasy book that I'm reading in June, but it's something a little bit different. It's a little bit of a different situation. You can check out last Thursday's video for a little bit more information on that. Sorry for the voice crack, by the way. I've been feeling under the weather, so my voice isn't doing fantastic right now. In either case, I've just kind of been reading a lot of shorter books, a lot of quicker books, a lot of easier books, just the kind of thing to reset my brain after spending 3 years reading this huge set of chonkers and having my mind completely just very occupied by that experience, as well as reading even some other fantasy in the midst, right? Like I read things like Faithful and the Fallen while I was reading Wheel of Time. I read the ATTRIBUTIon Trilogy while I was reading Wheel of Time, right? So like I've been reading quite a bit of fantasy over the last few years at various different points in time, and I'm pretty much ready to dive into my next epic fantasy read here pretty soon now. That, like I said, it's been a few months since I've been reading any epic fantasy. So that's what today's video is about. And, to kind of get on the topic of things a little bit right off the bat here, no, this video is not about starting to read the Cosmere today. I think that I might start that in 2027. Instead, I have something a little bit more niche on my radar, and it has been on my radar since 2021. So let's properly get into what this video is talking about, basically being ready for something a little bit shorter, even within the epic fantasy context, right? After such a huge commitment in the form of the Wheel of Time, I am ready for short. That's not necessarily being in the form of short books per se. That's what I've been doing all spring, as I've mentioned here, been reading shorter books since I finished The Wheel of Time, but rather I want to read an epic fantasy series that isn't ginormous, right? So that means that I'm not jumping straight into the Cosmere, and even when I do read the Cosmere, I'm not going to read it like The Wheel of Time, right? It'll just be reading the standalone or the trilogy or whatever here and there, but with plenty of time in between, so I don't absolutely destroy myself on it. I also wasn't going to jump into something like you can barely see poking down there, Malazan, for example. I have various friends who wanted me to read Malazan, and I was tempted to join a read-along early this year for that, but I ultimately didn't because I knew it would be crazy and probably stupid to do so, because I need a little bit of a break. And so when I am getting back into this epic fantasy idea right now, it's because I want to read something a little bit shorter, namely something more like a trilogy. I haven't exactly been able to read other epic fantasy series for a little while now because of the frequency of reading Wheel of Time books. I was able to read things like The Faithful and the Fallen because that was in 2024 when I spent quite a handful of months basically in between each Wheel of Time book. So I was able to read other things in there now and again. Even in 2023 with the early series, I was able to read stuff in between because I was doing those books every couple of months. But when it got to 2025, and then especially early this year, I was reading a Wheel of Time book every other month, and early this year it was back-to-back months for the last few books. So I just haven't had a whole lot of space to fit other epic fantasy stuff in, just in terms of being able to stay sane while doing so. That means that this year, I've had a backlog of various different fantasy trilogies on my radar for a while, things that I want to read. Things like Lycania's trilogy that you can see down there. Even Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn you can count down there, since I have it in the trilogy version rather than the 4-book version. 5 Warrior Angels, even A Blood and Bone by John Gwynne, the follow-up to Faithful and the Fallen, I want to read pretty soon. So like all of these are series that have been on my radar. In fact, Of Blood and Bone was the other option for what I was going to read as epic fantasy next. But my other primary option is what I have actually ultimately ended up reading. So that is the Legacy Trilogy by Matthew Ward. Legacy of Ash, Legacy of Steel, and Legacy of Light. So these are 3 pretty chonky books, right? But they are only 3 books. I really like the simplicity of these covers. I think there's certainly something to be said for covers that just look cool without having too much going on, and I think that these covers happen to strike that balance the best of basically any that I've seen. All the way back in late 2021 when I first saw these covers, I was like, I want to read those. And so I picked the books up. It was one of those rare moments. It's just like, you know what? Those covers are cool enough that that's all I need to convince me to give them a try. And so between Of Blood and Bone and the Legacy Trilogy, this is what I'm reading next, and is basically what I've got on the docket. You know, Matthew Ward also has another trilogy he's written since then, the Soulfire Saga, which I also own down there, and I was debating reading Soulfire instead of the Legacy Trilogy because you know, it's the same author, those books are a little bit shorter, but because I had ordered the Legacy Trilogy because of the vibes and the covers several years ago, it just made more sense for me to pick these up to read instead, because they're the ones that I've had on my radar for so much longer, right? You know, that means that nearly a whole month before I even started posting BookTube content, I've been wanting to read these books. So it's been a little while. They've been on the bucket list as far as fantasy goes a little bit longer than most series, or at least seriously a little bit longer than most series in my general memory, I suppose you could say. And so that's why I've ultimately decided to actually read them. Also worth noting is that I did make a video last year about fantasy series that I wanted to read after I did finish The Wheel of Time. That was one that was like looking forward to finishing the series and what I was going to read afterwards. And I'm like 99, if not 100% sure that the Legacy Trilogy did top that list when I made that video. So, you know, that's the way things go. It's kind of hard to explain why this became the top priority. It's kind of just a gut feeling in some ways, but I'm excited to see what's up. So let's talk a little bit about my expectations to some small degree, even though, you know, I don't really have the best idea per se of what I'm actually getting into here. It's not to say that I have no clue at all. It's just that I haven't actually looked too super much into the series because I want to go in relatively blind. It's a rather rare occurrence when I'm able to actually do that for myself, right? But I do think that I'm in for some interesting political complications with the series, both based off of the blurb and based off of one review that I had seen for Legacy of Ash specifically way back when I first ordered the books, you know. I'm also fairly confident that this is going to have a lot of deific tampering. There's the reputation of this being, I've heard one particular person compare it to Malazan in the sense that the gods actually get involved with the world, but I have no idea how true that kind of a claim is, given that I haven't read Malazan, and also obviously not this yet either, so I can't say for sure, but beyond these things, I'm also, just like I said, surprisingly ignorant of what I'm getting into. Relative to my total excitement, I'm very ignorant of what I'm getting into. But there are a couple reasons why I do want to get into it. So let me just read very briefly the blurb from the back of the first book. Just it's a very short blurb, so we'll just kind of see what the vibes are based off of that, right? It says, "A shadow has fallen over the Tressian Republic, but as Tressia falls, heroes rise. Victor Akadra is the Republic's champion, a warrior without equal. He also hides a secret that would see him burned as a heretic. Josiri Trelin is Victor's sworn enemy. A political prisoner, he dreams of reigniting his mother's failed rebellion. Kalen Trelin, Josiri's sister, seeks only to break free of their tarnished legacy, to escape the expectations and prejudice that haunt the family name. As war spreads across the Republic, they must set aside their differences in order to save their homeland. However, decades of bad blood are not easily forgotten, and victory will demand a darker price than any of them could have imagined. So it's a little bit of a vague blurb, but one that, gets me pretty excited to read the books. And like I said, just generally pretty excited. I don't know a whole lot more than basically all of what I've just told you, but between knowing those things and the fact that Matthew Ward is also a Warhammer 40k writer, that's also something that's pretty interesting to note. That's something that might strike a handful of viewers quite starkly, we shall say. Matthew Ward, as far as being a Warhammer 40k writer is concerned, he has written a handful of the tabletop RPG rule books, if I'm understanding correctly, so he has been involved with a little bit of that side of Warhammer, but he's also been, more notably, not a writer of books within Warhammer universe. He's been the lead writer on a few of the Warhammer games, notably the Vermintide games and Darktide. Those games he both did the lead writing for. So between some of those things and also doing voice direction for Darktide and for Vermintide 2, Matthew Ward has a little bit to do with that universe. So it's pretty understandable that he's an established writer within a sort of sci-fi fantasy sphere, and that maybe he knows what he's doing, considering that I've heard very many good things about the writing of Vermintide 2 and of Darktide, and also just that they're fun games. So that is something definitely to make me more excited, I guess, even though I haven't played those games and I'm not personally into Warhammer yet. But yeah, that's also something that might interest some random folk here. So yeah, between all of that, I'm just looking forward to getting this. And as a random fun fact to basically end this little section on, all 3 of these Legacy books have exactly 69 chapters apiece. Nice. So yeah, that is basically the video. I suppose I should wrap this up basically with my approximate reading schedule when I plan to read these books. The fact that I'm making this video now means that I'm planning to read them pretty soon. This isn't some nascent, like, oh yeah, 15 million years in the future I'll get to this. No, I'm starting reading these books, hopefully 1 book per month, and right now that 1 per month rate encompasses July, August, and September of 2026. This video comes out, in mid-June of 2026? So we're looking at next month, so here in a handful of weeks, basically within the next handful of weeks is when I'm going to start the series, and assuming that I do get each book read 1 per month, that will last a few months through the rest of the summer, basically. So each one of these books is in the ballpark of 750 pages. It's not the most dense as far as like word count per page goes, nothing like Wheel of Time, for example, so it's not quite that long per book, even though there's still long books. But basically what that means is that I think that each of these should go, semi-quick as far as epic fantasy goes, or at least compared to my Wheel of Time experience, where I expected those books to take, quite frankly, for the most part, anywhere from 25 to 45 hours a piece. I'm expecting that I can get, 250 pages of each one of these books in a week. That's only like 40 to 50 pages a day. That's very doable, even for me and my slow reading pace. So even if each one of these books took like 3 weeks to get through, right, 40 to 50 pages a day for 3 weeks, that's a pretty solid pace for me, without being too much and also without being necessarily too conservative at the same time. Considering that over the next 3 months I only really have Discworld books and Rick Riordan planned during those 3 months outside of these books, Riordan being YA and very quick, and Discworld being very short and very quick reads, that means that I do think that I can get through these, right? I think that 3 weeks to complete each Legacy novel seems pretty generous to me. So if there's anybody else who, just randomly on a whim happens to see this video and wants to join me and read this trilogy at the same time, please feel free to do so. Feel free to join me. By the way, if you do as well want to join Matthew Ward's website, I believe it's called thetowerofstars.co. Let me double check. Yes, the towerofstars.co.uk is Matthew Ward's website, and if you go to that site, there is actually a tab there that is specifically called the Legacy Trilogy Resources, I believe. Let me double check that information. Yeah, it's literally at the top left of this page, Legacy Trilogy Resources, and what that includes is some summaries for the previous books, but what it also includes is things like Matthew Ward himself pronouncing all of the names of stuff from the series. So, you know, it's a pronunciation guide, that kind of thing for epic fantasy. Wow, that's pretty neat. So, you know, you can go to his website and get a couple of additional resources for the trilogy as well, which I think is pretty unique and admirable. So, yeah, that is basically the video. The only other thing to note in this video, bringing it to a close, is about, you know, video plans with regards to the series, right? I will likely review each one of these books the month after that it gets read, so probably like I'll do the monthly reading wrap-up and TBR the first Tuesday of each month like normal. Probably the week after that each month is the week that I'll review each of these books, presuming that the one-a-month schedule happens to work out. And after I'm finished with the trilogy, I will do a full series review and ranking. Sometime after that third review happens, maybe a month later, I'm not 100% sure, but you know, that is something that I'm going to do for sure, just my regular thing when it comes to reviewing and then covering a full series. But I'm also going to try to reach out to Matthew Ward himself, to Mr. Ward, to have him on the channel after I'm finished with this, if possible. That's something that I'm very interested in trying to do. So if any of that is something that you would be interested in and looking forward to, let me know. I know I'm pretty excited about this, and definitely excited to be getting into the series finally, 4.5 years after I picked them up wanting to read them. So, you know, I might be the only one here who's excited about this video, excited about the series, I don't know, but I'm glad to finally be checking this out and getting ready to mark it off my list, off my bucket list, because it's been there a little while. But all things said and done, that is going to be the end of this video. Thank you for watching this video. If you did, I don't anticipate, like I said, that very many people will, but maybe they will, I don't know. If you're excited about this and want to give it a shot, again, let me know. Otherwise, for now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.